morning. Good morning. My name is Michael Cohn, and on behalf of our team at GSV and our partners at Arizona State University, welcome to the 17th ASU+GSV Summit. This year's theme is the power of fusion, the concept that when we come together in these turbulent times, great systemic change can happen. So along those lines, take a second and introduce yourself to the person you're sitting next to. Or if you're sitting next to someone that you know, introduce yourself to someone else. All right. I said take a quick second, not a minute. Anyhow, that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Quick show of hands. Who's here for the first time? Wow. Well, welcome. And on this idea of the power of fusion, while you're here, use the app. Go to things that you're interested in. Go to news sessions that you have no idea what they're about. Really break out, take advantage, navigate the event, ask for help, introduce yourself, make connections, and most importantly, have fun. So with that said, I'm going to bring out and introduce our first conversation. So to get us started, I'm thrilled to bring onto the stage Intuit founder Scott Cook. Scott is one of the greatest innovators of our lifetime. Very few have built $100 billion market cap software companies. Someone whose ideas have shaped how modern companies operate, and his thinking on customer-driven innovation shows up everywhere from Silicon Valley all the way to the pages of Harvard Business Review. Since establishing the Valhalla Foundation in 2003, Scott and his team have impacted millions of learners around the country and supported great organizations like the Charter School Growth Fund, Digital Promise, KIP, and Talking Points, among countless others. So to tell us what kids need to learn in the age of AI, please welcome Scott, along with Kaya Henderson, best known for her time as the Chancellor of DC Public Schools and now EVP of the Aspen Institute, and then Rick Hess, Senior Fellow and Director of Education Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute.
Well, good morning. What do students need to learn and be good at in the age of AI? Not the how, but the what. Let's see if the slide can come up. That's the question that our foundation wanted to answer. So we interviewed over 60 experts, educators, education researchers, psychologists, technologists, and kids. The QR code here will take you to a summary of what they said. And today, I'm joined on stage today by two of the experts that we interviewed, Kaya and Rick. And they bring many years of experience to this question. So what are your views on this question? What do we need all kids to know and be good at in the age of AI? Kaya, you first.
So first, thanks for having me. This is a conversation that we continue to have over and over again. And I think that there are three key things that rise to the top for me in terms of what kids need to know in the age of AI. The first thing that I think they need to know is how to solve problems generally. Call it critical thinking, call it whatever. It is a skill that doesn't matter with technology, without technology. It's really important for young people to be able to solve problems, to struggle, to build resilience, to figure out how to get to answers in multiple ways. I think that is going to serve them incredibly well. The second piece that I think is discernment. So in a time where, you know, AI produces all kinds of deep fakes and, you know, fake news and whatever you want to call it, I think young people are going to need to understand how they can figure out what's real from what's not. And most importantly, I think that kids are really going to need human skills more than anything else. The ability to relate to one another, the ability to agree, disagree, have civil discourse, to have empathy, to work together in teams, those skills are going to become more important than they've ever been before, I think, in this age of AI.
Rick.
It's always tough to go after Kaya because Kaya says things so well. For me, the short answer is they need to know in the age of AI the same things they needed to know before the age of AI. This is a conversation we have a lot. 4 years ago, the National Council of Teachers of English said kids needed to read fewer books, we needed to decenter books, and kids needed to spend more time on memes and short-form videos. I thought that was bad advice. 20 years ago, the then dean of Stanford's Graduate School of Education said that because of the existence of the internet, kids didn't need to know about battles or geography or periodic table of elements because they could Google it. 30 years ago, Arnold Packer, the co-author of Workforce 2000, said it was a waste of time for high schoolers to learn biology or anatomy or to dissect frogs because they needed to learn future-forward skills instead. They needed to learn how to operate video disks and fax machines. A century ago, the National Commission that wrote the Cardinal Principles for Education said, look, in a world that had been changed by factories and cars and radios and World War, students needed new skills. They needed to spend less time on academics, more time on the worthy use of leisure. I think we have been through this song and dance time after time. There is a reason that we keep coming back to academics as the grounding of what students should learn in school. It is first because the way the human mind works is by channeling working memory through demonstration, deliberate practice, and feedback until those things have migrated to long-term memory, where they become us, where they shape our intuitions and our understanding of the world. And the reason we keep coming back to academics is because literacy, numeracy, geometry, geography, history, science, literature, these are the basic building blocks that help a student understand the natural world and the civilization in which they abide. That's why these have remained remarkably stable around the globe and over the centuries. So what should students learn? They should learn those things. We need to teach them a lot better. We need to use time in school a whole lot more effectively. But this is not an excuse for us not to equip students to have agency of the mind. It's an excuse to make sure that they have those tools so they can do what Kai is talking about.
Let me ask about another idea that came up, Kaya, that you mentioned in your opening. Many interviewees talked about human skills. What are those and why are they important?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that we are in person, we see each other every day, we live together in community, we have a society, and all of that requires human interaction, whether it's in your home or at school or at work. And one of the things that we increasingly see in the youth mental health crisis, if there is one, is an inability to engage with one another in person because of the way screens interact on the brain. And that's not going to change. It doesn't matter if AI becomes even more ubiquitous than it is. We are still going to live in community and need the ability to connect and work together. I think part of the reason why democracy is imperiled right now is because we can't talk to each other. Our government can't function because people can't talk to one another. And none of that is going to go away. And so it's very important. Technology is a tool, right? It is not the end, it is a means. And we can actually use technology to help us with our humanistic skills. I've seen apps that help people disagree. I've seen apps that help people facilitate conversations. That's great. But at the end of the day, there are always two people talking to one another. And so if we aren't equipping our young people, if we aren't giving them practice at civil discourse, if we aren't giving them the opportunity to work together so that they can disagree and come to a good answer together, then that's the humanistic skills that I think young people need. Empathy, right? We are, people talk about a loneliness crisis for young people. Actually, young people are looking for opportunities to engage. My young people talk about third spaces, right? Where they can gather and be in community, where there's no technology, where they can talk to one another and be in joint endeavors. And so I think that the young people are recognizing that that is even more important than these so-called AI skills that the education ecosystem is discussing.
I started teaching high school 36 years ago. I still don't know what human skills are. I don't think most people do either. In fact, I think part of the problem is the definition of human skills or durable skills or 21st century skills tends to change every time a new grant cycle opens up. Well, one of the great things about human skills is that it's always about anticipating the new skills that are going to be needed. And what's great about that is we don't know whether or not you're right. So people get to write books, give TED Talks, raise grants, and by the time the future comes around, everybody's forgotten what you were talking about 10, 20 years ago. Look, if anybody is telling you that creativity, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, that these were not important in 1976 or 1956 or 1936, they're nuts. There's a reason that Dale Carnegie sold millions of copies of How to Win Friends and Influence People in 1936. It's because these skills have always been, as Kaya said, foundational to human endeavor. So look, are these skills, I don't mean to suggest these skills aren't important. Like Kaya said, empathy, understanding, the ability to hear one another, the ability to analyze and discern. These are fundamental skills. But these are best learned, I would argue, through wrestling with heavy cognitive load, by wrestling with great works of literature, by working as teams on important STEM projects. That is how we actually develop and cultivate these skills in meaningful ways. When people are suggesting that what we need to do to cultivate critical thinking or collaboration is to have kids learn less academic content, I think that is a very destructive path to go down.
I remember one of our interviewees, an academic in his 60s, told us that the last time that he did something by himself solo, not in a team, was his PhD defense when he was in his 20s. Okay, let's move now to the quick lightning round. I'm going to offer up a couple of provocative statements we heard and then ask you for your quick reactions. Okay, one was, all kids, we might even have a slide. Here we go. All kids need to learn a new skill called AI literacy. What's your quick reaction?
Trash.
Pardon?
Trash.
Trash. Okay. I love it.
We have driver ed. Kids have learned how to use word processors and protractors over the years. I'm not opposed to having kids learn how to use AI, like Tyler says in high school. I admire that he's not talking K-8. He says a third of time. That's 400 hours a year. I can't imagine the human being who needs 400 hours a year for 4 years to be taught how to use AI. That seems bizarre. But at this point, we're now negotiating about the margins. It's a useful conversation.
Okay. Next provocative statement, that K through 12 really is not going to change because of AI.
Always a safe bet. Although I would just disagree with you on just slightly. This was my dissertation, my PhD dissertation almost 30 years ago, the book that made my career. It turns out that, for instance, the problem with urban school reform is not that nothing changes, but that they're rolling out a new initiative every 3 months. And so everybody in those systems learns to close their door and wait it out and tell each other this too shall pass. And I think one of the real concerns that folks in a room like this should be wrestling with is how many educators are just looking at their watches and waiting for this stuff to blow over to the next thing.
I mean, I'm just reminded of the fact that the film projector was going to revolutionize education. The overhead machine was going to revolutionize copy machines, TV, laptops, and we don't shop the way we used to shop. We don't bank the way we used to bank. We don't find information out the way we used to find information out. Oh, but we school exactly the way we have been schooling. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that this system was designed to withstand all of the vicissitudes that come through. And this is a vicissitude. The internet was a vicissitude, and it didn't change a lot. We use it. It is a tool. But I do think that if you had to bet on the staying power of schools, it's a good bet. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't integrate AI into the way we're teaching and the way we're learning? Of course not. AI unleashes all kinds of incredible opportunities for teachers to differentiate. The hardest thing in education is differentiation. Any teacher will tell you. We now have tools that can analyze what happened in classroom today, draw you up a lesson plan for tomorrow that is tailored to each and every single one of those kids. Super amazing. That's great. There are all kinds of use cases for how AI can actually make schooling better. But change the whole thing? I'm not exactly sure.
Scott, and just one point for folks who are walking away from the session. There's a cynic's case and a humanist's case for why that works the way Kaya just said. The cynic's case is because everybody in education doesn't get it, we don't understand it, we don't understand how transformative AI is, we're stuck in our contracts and our old vending agreements. The humanist case is that at the end of the day, education is about cultivating the human mind. It's about agency. And these are things that are developed by human beings in concert with human beings, wrestling with content and problems that are worth challenging. And I think what we want to do is we want to move at the pace that respects that and not imagine that the only obstacle here is that people aren't getting it.
Excellent. Now a question. This one, longer answers are fine. Where do you see AI helping education get better? And what will it be good at?
So I think there's at least two really powerful use cases that I find completely compelling. One is, I mentioned a dean of Stanford 20 years ago. The dean at University of Michigan 20 years ago, Deborah Ball, was doing this phenomenal work on elementary numeracy, on math instruction. They were having terrific success figuring out where are the sticking points on things like operations with third and fourth graders and finding diagnostic strategies that seem to be effective. The problem is actually getting the diagnostics and then the interventions in the hands of teachers in real time was insuperable. Like we have seen in healthcare, though, one of the powers of algorithm-driven decision-making and now of AI is that it is a possibility to equip human educators to understand what they are observing in real time so that they can diagnose more precisely and figure out appropriate interventions and see if those are working. Hugely positive. The second thing is that when you spend much time in the academic core of most American schools, not only is there a lot of wasted time and transitions and the rest, but there is a deadening lack of targeted demonstration, real-time practice, real-time feedback in ways that create loops of deliberate learning. John Maeda, Harvard's John Maeda, wrote about this in Deeper Learning and said, look, where do you see that stuff happening in schools? You see it happening not in the academic core, but on the periphery. You find it in the extracurriculars, in drama, and in music, and on the sports teams. And one of the things that those have is they use technology much more effectively. Look at your typical high school football locker room to see how to use technology really effectively. But they also have much more opportunity to work closely with learners. I think there's real possibility for AI to help create those cycles of demonstration, deliberate practice, feedback. What worries me? Two main things. One, I worry about distraction and depersonalization. Basically, you can just go back to all of the cheerful sales pitches we got on screens and social media and cell phones in schools from 2010 to 2016 and understand all of the devastating effects we've had on reading, on comprehension, on engagement, on social interactions. I worry that when kids are earbutted up staring at screens with AI, it's going to be all of that and more so. The second thing, and let me stop with this, the big lesson for me, the most illuminating example for me, is the calculator. Any of you doing this long enough, remember 2 generations ago, when the calculator was introduced to schools, there was a very vocal contingent which said, we don't need to teach computation anymore. It's a waste of time, it's like cursive. Kids have these devices, they can punch in numbers. The problem is that if you don't master computation through working memory to long-term memory where you mastered automaticity, you are at sea when you get to higher math. You're also at sea when it comes to personal finance and to probability later in life. Now, the right use case of the calculator was once you developed automaticity, it was a huge time saver in trigonometry or calculus, because instead of spending 20 minutes working something through on a slide rule, kids could just focus on the parts of the problem that mattered. But for me, the takeaway here is that if we understand AI as a tool for developing discernment, knowledge, agency, it could be a very powerful device. When somebody is offering AI as an excuse to consign knowledge or capability to the dustbin of history, I get extraordinarily nervous.
There are a couple of use cases that make me excited. First, the differentiation case that I talked about earlier, total game changer for teachers. I think we're still working out how that makes its way into the practical day-to-day classroom, but I'm confident, especially as I see more educators creating the educational technology products that are powered by AI. I think before there were a bunch of technologists who were creating solutions for problems that they didn't understand, but now what I see is educators who are using these tools to create real solutions that are able to be integrated in the classroom. Writing is an incredibly important skill, and I actually have seen people use AI in writing. So a quick example is, it took us months to get test scores back if there was a writing component. Now you can have AI analyze writing incredibly quickly, and we don't have to wait months and months in order to get feedback. That feedback loop for teachers, for students, is incredible. I'm watching college professors, English professors, ask their young people to write an essay, ask AI to improve it, take note of the differences between the drafts and use it as a tool, right? Not say you cannot use it for writing, but actually it helps people. Writing is a hard thing to master, and so if we have a tool that's helping us improve our writing, I think that's a great use case. There's also the idea of lesson planning. So how many teachers are sitting at home on a Sunday night trying to figure out how to make their lessons more engaging or how to reflect kids' interests or, to see kids, their cultures, their communities, and what they're teaching? You can actually zhuzh up a lesson plan incredibly quickly with whatever kinds of things that you want that are going to make your young people more engaged. That is game-changing, right? Totally game-changing. So I think that there are a number of ways that we can use AI to enhance, support, but again, it is not the destination. It is, it helps us on a journey.
Boy, let me ask about writing. In the scenario you described where a student writes and then the AI gives the edits or gives the suggestions, how fast does that feedback loop happen?
In seconds, literally in seconds, yeah.
So I've always marveled at comparison to sports, which you were talking about, Rick, how well would you learn to shoot baskets if when you took a shot, you had to wait to the next week or the next month to find out if the ball went in? Learning thrives with fast feedback. It dies without it. And the ability, it's impossible for teachers to give that fast feedback because they have 30 papers to grade. But the ability of AI to do that in seconds is really thrilling. And then for the student to try again and again. Well, that's fantastic. Now, let me just move to the final slide. We'll wind up here. So we encourage you to share your ideas. We have this website. You can get there through the QR code. And in addition to showing hundreds of the quotes from the people we interviewed, it also lists at the end some of the challenges facing the incorporation of AI and what students should learn. And then it seeks for feedback from those in the field who have thoughts on those challenges and more. So we look forward to your feedback. And now, as we finish, join me in thanking our two experts, Kaya and Rick. Thank you. Well done. Okay, go down.
All right. Shifting from AI at the start, we're going to move to AI in the workforce. So we have a really exciting conversation coming up next. At a time when AI is rewriting jobs, skills are evolving in real time, and companies are rethinking everything about talent. But there's one question that matters. How do you actually lead people through it? So to tell us about bringing civility back to the water cooler and why it matters for leaders, teams, and results, please welcome Johnny Taylor, President and CEO of SHRM, and my partner, Deborah Quazzo. Give him a round of applause.
All right. Could not be more thrilled to be on stage this morning with my good friend Johnny Taylor, a man who I love for his humor, his courageous candor, and always willing to kind of say what he believes, and that's a rare breed these days sometimes. I kind of wanted to start with Johnny. Johnny is leading a SHRM, as we all know. It is the dominant global platform for the all HR executives and CEOs who lead those groups. It's 340,000 members globally. And HR has been, effectively in the proverbial hot seat, not just last year or the year before, probably a good decade, right? So it's been a pretty interesting organization to be leading. Why don't we just start out with, give us a beat on what CEOs and HR leaders are most focused on today. We're obviously, a big part of our topic here is sort of the evolution of DEI into D&I, diversity and inclusion, and all of that. But give us a beat on what leaders are thinking out there.
Wow, so it's quite different. There are probably three big topics. AI, who in the world isn't talking about AI, right? But particularly in the workplace. I was on this morning with the president of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve and talking about this topic of what does this all mean for human beings? Like, what's the right number of people? What skills should those people have? All of that. So anything AI, and I'll break that down a little further. Secondly, and much to our surprise, is Deborah, a big conversation around civility, and more sadly, incivility. The fact that we're at a point right now where CEOs are having to and are being confronted by their employees in fairly uncivil ways, and employees are confronting each other. There's a level of just anger, right? I don't know if you all know it and feel it, like everyone's mad, and it shows up in the workplace. So the second issue is around incivility, and thirdly, related to the first, is skills. Like, we all want to be in a skills-first environment. The problem is we don't know how to operate in that environment. We know we need people. We know we need them to have the skills. We're just not sure how to make that work.
Yeah, and I want to come back to the AI question, particularly, the view on whether it exacerbates the existing issues we have around diversity and inclusion. Obviously, over the last decade, we had workforce DEI efforts accelerated in response to Me Too movement, the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, et cetera. Give us from your vantage point now, with the benefit of a couple of years of digesting and appreciating, how did those moments really sort of reshape corporate America's thinking about diversity and inclusion? And where, if anywhere, do you believe organizations perhaps overcorrected?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. If you stop and think about this, I've been at this game long enough. I was talking to a couple of kids the other day, and and I call them kids. They were probably 25, but they were talking about, Johnny, this George Floyd moment. And I said, I'm old enough to have been around in the Rodney King moment. So I've seen this movie before, totally predicting that we would be where we are right now. So what happens is you have this moment where there's a racial reckoning, or in the case of Me Too, there's around gender and sex, and all of a sudden everyone feels compelled to do something. And if you're not doing anything, then you're bad, you're judged. And so what we saw over the last 5 years, and probably 7 or 8, if you think Me Too-ish 17, 18, 16, 17, 18, so call it a decade, is corporations just responded in the moment.
Yep.
And it wasn't particularly thoughtful. I remembered right after George Floyd seeing some CEOs, George Floyd's murder, that is, some CEOs say, 1/3 of my new hires will be black. Like, where the hell did you get that from? Like, you just decided that you're going to decree it. It was illegal, probably. It was stupid. It was divisive, well-intended. But I think that was the beginning of this disaster that we saw. And the result is everyone is now at this point of tension. But let me be clear. This didn't start. The easiest thing for people to say is this is a Trump administration thing. We all know, if you're in education or an ed tech conference, right, that the Supreme Court outlawed affirmative action in higher ed in 2023. So that was before a President Trump. These cases have been working their way through the system for quite a while. More of them are coming. And so right now, I think there's this moment. Yes, the president signed his executive orders the first time, and now the second time. And we have 3 years of this, 2.5 years, whoever's counting, right? But at the end of the day, we're being more thoughtful now about this. I think this is a real opportunity. I've been in this world when it was once affirmative action. Then it became diversity. Then it became diversity and inclusion. Then it became diversity, equity, inclusion. Then it became diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. Then they added a B for belonging. The point is, and I don't mean to be glib about it, kinda, but the reality is we have not been thoughtful. We've just sort of put stuff and kept attaching stuff to it, and it needs to be addressed. So corporate America is now taking a more thoughtful approach, I think, to come up with inclusion and diversity strategies that work for all. And that's really the goal. So we at SHRM have come up with this framing, talking to CEOs, talking to general counsel, talking to the regulators and your legislators. And it says the new work around diversity. By the way, call it whatever you want. But the new work is going to have 3 sort of pillars to it. 1, any inclusion work that you do must be legally compliant. Whether you like it or not, there's a law and it must be legally compliant. Secondly, it needs to be workplace unifying. There's no point to bringing a group of people in a room and saying, everyone like you, white men, is bad. Your father was bad, your son's bad, your unborn grandson's bad, everybody's bad. Because even if it were true, I'm not sure that achieves anything. Sure as hell doesn't unify the workplace. And then thirdly, it must be business accretive. So this framing is legally compliant, workplace unifying, and business accretive is the new and thoughtful way to do good inclusion work, inclusion for all.
So, and that makes complete sense. I think if we kind of step back at the beginning of all this, the real point in the early movements, whatever you wanted to call them, was that a view that high potential people, and typically women and underrepresented minorities, underrepresented groups broadly, were not getting fair access to all opportunity. And if I kind of step back and look a bit, and I can only stand in the shoes of a woman, and so I can be in that category, I look at the numbers and I look at women on boards declining. I don't see much improvement in the venture capital industry where I've been operating, in the C-suite, in political office, although that takes some initiative there too. It just doesn't feel like we're all there. And how, in light of all the changes that have occurred, and people feel, we had a fantastic conversation yesterday with some women around the topic of silence. And while silence may seem like you're neutral, a great point was made, in a corporation, it's not at all neutral. What do you think? How can we make sure that high potential people of all groups are getting the opportunity to achieve, the greatest opportunities? I think that's what worries me in the numbers.
Yeah, and for good reason. The numbers are concerning. We are seeing, we're not seeing, think about all of the progress that we made, and there's some real fear that we will lose some of this. I look at the number of African-American CEOs in the Fortune 500. 2 decades ago, that was a higher number. So it is of concern. I think the answer, Deborah, and it's a very complicated conversation, but we have to be very intentional, much earlier in the process of identifying talent. I mean, irrespective of their background, like talent. And I think if done properly, because I believe God does this in such a way and gives all communities genius, if we do it in the right way early on, remove some of the systemic barriers, and they exist, by the way. Anyone who deludes themselves into believing that everything's fair for everyone is deluded, just that. But if we are thoughtful about looking at our recruitment processes, for example, what schools do we recruit from? Do we need to recruit from schools at all or exclusively? So finding talent wherever that talent lies. I mean, the very beginning of the process is, we're looking for college degrees. That weeds out a ton of very talented and capable people. And then it gets even more selective when we say we want you to have college degrees from the right schools, in the right majors, with the right GPA. In other words, we are actually engaged in an exclusionary process, which is why you can't go 20 years forward and say, oh my gosh, we don't have any diverse talent. Well, because you've weeded them out. That's the problem. So at its core, this is going back to the beginning and being very thoughtful about how we make our recruitment efforts inclusionary versus exclusionary.
Can you talk a little bit, AI is interesting. You talked about it at the front end. On the one hand, you could view it as creating more divisiveness amongst folks. And on the other hand, it actually, it's a very accessible technology. It's not like coding. It is very accessible, and so in many ways, it could potentially level the playing field. People are in paralysis right now, I would say. It's the deer in headlights phase that we're all in, and I've seen it everywhere. You must see that all the time. Just love to hear what you think about, just kind of at that, like how can AI allow us to tap into more diverse pipelines, et cetera. Just love to hear.
Yeah, so this is, again, I'm old enough to now talk about this. Remember the old digital divide language we used to use? She's nodding. This is an opportunity for everyone in this room in particular, if you're engaged in PK through 12 and arguably PK through 16 education. This is your moment. This is the opportunity. It is very frustrating to me when I see certain communities not being exposed to this new technology. I'm reminded of the day when any of us actually started talking about AI. It wasn't that long ago. Actually, I was at your conference in 2023, but I remember the day, November 30th of 2022. That's when ChatGPT was introduced. We act like it was a long time ago. It wasn't that long ago, and I was right here at your conference in April of 23 talking about and having this conversation. The reality is many of our PK through 12, especially public school kids, are not being exposed to the fundamentals of this technology, how to use it, what it is, and how not just to play with it, but to actually understand it and use it to build their career. So from a skills attainment standpoint, I lay this right at the feet of PK through 12 public education. I mean, it's public and private, but the idea is it's an education challenge.
But doesn't it also become a challenge for your customers? We've had this long-held view that corporations are the fourth education system. They have to be. Yes. Doesn't it fall at their feet as well?
Big time. So it's interesting. Yes, young people, PK through 12. That's our future workforce. But the reality is, we've got now a significant and growing population of 45 and 50-year-olds who are going to be displaced by this technology. The question is oftentimes, is AI going to take my job? I said, no. For now, it's someone who's proficient in AI. Ultimately, we may get to the point where AI takes your job. That's a different conversation. But right now, you're being replaced by people who have the skills and who are familiar with this new technology. And so we are doing two things. In corporations, we have, and if they're learning and development professionals, I'm on the board of Guild, for example. The absolute responsibility of ours is to educate that person who is not a digital native so that they have a longer career. And we need them. You know, we have a birth rate problem in this country, number one.
Yep.
We have a significant birth rate problem, and it's in a lot of the developed world. And then we also have a skills gap. So there's this interesting paradox where on one hand, we say we have 4.5% unemployment, 4.3 or so percent unemployment, and then we have people saying, but I can't find a job, significant. There's paradox. And then employers are saying, but I can't find talent. So we have this problem that we're trying to sort right now in the workplace, but most of it is foundational. We haven't trained people to do those new jobs. So new jobs are coming. We just don't know that people have the skills to do those jobs. And then I have to layer on top of all of it, our research team is now calling this, you know, catfishing as a concept? They're now calling it skill fishing. This notion that people present themselves as having skills that they actually don't have. The resume is beautiful. They actually show up the right way, and now we're stuck with this person who actually can't do the job. And that was the beauty of the degree, was at least we had more confidence that it was a proxy for this person has the skills to do something. Now people are coming up and they're skill fishing us. And so you hire the person with the beautiful resume and everything, and they come in and they fail miserably. So it's a really interesting dilemma. Corporate America is trying to sort that right now.
Yeah, it's a complicated time, no question about that. I want to really sort of finish off the conversation with something I think you've taken tremendous leadership on. You've had an embrace of embracing our differences. You've led at SHRM, encouraging companies to help their employees embrace difference. And you spoke about this at the front end, but about the pressure that folks are under around workforce civility, employees, showing uncivility to employers, but also within the. So I'm just talk to us about kind of initiatives that you all are helping companies develop. I think it is we've talked about we've got a power of love, a power of what are we teaching people about power actually. And how do they behave with each other? So I'd just love to hear. I think this is a very important thing that you've been out in front on for quite a while, and it's hopefully coming home to roost. And I would just love to hear kind of what's on front of mind for you and how you want to lead forward in your massive organization on this topic.
Yeah. So this is a topic that we've been talking about in so many ways for years, but now it's real. 2019. We started doing some research, and the word toxicity began to show up in the SHRM research. And we thought toxicity was race, gender, national origin based, someone's discriminating against me in the workplace. We also thought that it was my managers creating a toxic environment, because historically our data would tell us, Deborah, that people don't leave companies, they leave their managers. For the first time, we began seeing something different, and it was, I'm leaving the person who sits next to me. They have made the workplace so toxic for me because we are different and managing differences. See, it's great to say we're going to bring a whole bunch of different people together, but that creates its own new set of dynamics, right? It's not easy for people to get together who are different. They naturally don't operate that way, so human beings don't. You walk into a room, and I say to people, we are always looking for a commonality. So one of the things that we are focused on here at SHRM is the conversation around, I get it, we've said embracing our differences, tolerating each other. I don't know that that's a good way to talk about it. But anyway, people are focused on our differences. I think we've got to start getting people back to focusing on what we have in common. The reality is, if I go to a reception and I meet that gentleman on the front row, I don't walk up and say, hey, how are we different? And no one does that. Human beings say, where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up? We're trying to find those things that we have in common, and we know that we have a lot more in common than we have different. I think one of the fundamental challenges with the diversity at work was we focus disproportionately on our differences. And as a result, we shouldn't be surprised that everyone's focused on our differences. And so we have to think very differently. The entire construct has to be, what do we have in common? How can we achieve diversity and at the same time ensure that everyone feels included. In fact, that's the only time you get a return on your diversity investment, is if people feel included. So these things are inextricably intertwined. We are committed forever. We know that our diversity is our strength. The big question is the inclusion component of it. Now, here's the challenge for us. People have become incredibly uncivil toward each other. There's a case right now that's before the National Labor Relations Board. I'm a lawyer, so I won't get too wonky about it. But a CEO decided to reorganize the business, delayer it, change titles, et cetera, lay off 5% of the workforce, what have you. During the CEO convening, an employee stands up essentially and says, "You're a rich jerk." Goes at the CEO in the middle of a meeting. The employer fires the employee. The National Labor Relations Board says, that person was engaged in protected behavior. The CEO appropriately says, no, that's uncivil behavior. That's not the behavior that we can model in an organization. And thus the legal battle goes on. So that'll work its way through the courts and up through the National Labor Relations Board, et cetera. My point is we've got to teach people how to be civil, which is shocking. We are at a point, I just cannot imagine that we are at a point, and it all started, I believe, I don't know where things start, but a lot of it started online, because I call people thumb thugs. And that people don't like the term, but yeah, you get online and you say very mean things with your fingertips. And now it's translating into in-person behavior, and civility is at an all-time high. Our data suggested that usually it goes up and it crests after an election cycle. It is fever pitch. Our elected officials aren't helping things. That's all I'll say, right? But putting that aside, I refuse to get political on your stage, right? But what I will say is we have an overall need to bring the temperature down. If we don't, we're going to have a real societal breakdown. Last point. SHRM's research says that after a person has experienced an incident of workplace incivility, it takes them about 37 minutes to recover from a productivity standpoint. So companies are losing, American companies are losing about $2.3 billion a year in lost productivity. Just think about it. You walk into the building, someone attacks you, you have a workplace act of incivility. You can't be expected to immediately go back and do your work. So this is a business issue for CEOs, it's a societal issue for all of us. We have got to do something about this incivility, and I think it's about bringing people together and focusing on what we have in common, less about how different we are.
I'd be a lot more than 37 minutes. But anyway, I just want to thank Johnny Taylor so much. I think the idea of civility as a leadership imperative is so critical to the future, to our forward motion, and for education and skills. And can't thank you enough for being on our stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. So for our next panel, we're going to shift gears and talk a little bit about school choice. Usually framed as a policy, but at its core, it's about something much more human, what families want for their kids. So today we're going to ask, what's love got to do with it? And whether love and not systems is actually the most important and powerful force shaping the future of education. So to explore that, we've brought together leaders who have been shaping the school choice movement from every angle. Ian Rowe, founder, Vertex Partnership Academies. Jeannie Allen, founder and CEO, Center for Education Reform and partner of the YAS Prize. Phyllis Lockett, CEO, LeapX, and Kevin Hall, CEO, Charter School Growth Fund. And leading the conversation, someone who has never been afraid to challenge the system, Michelle Rhee, partner of Equal Opportunity Ventures. Let's give them a warm welcome.
All right, so they tell us at the conference that we're not supposed to introduce the panel. Usually when I disagree with things, I just do what I want anyways. But in this case, this panel needs no introduction because this is the OGs of school choice and school reform. So they need no introduction. Today we're talking about school choice and what love has to do with it, how much parents love the schools that they send their kids to, how much kids love the schools that they're in. And when you think about school choice in the landscape right now, you could see it in two very different ways. On one hand, you could say, well, with the proliferation of charter schools and micro schools and ESAs, we have never been in a better place as it pertains to school choice. And if you look at it from another direction, you could say, well, in some communities, there are different structures and forces at play right now that are really inhibiting the growth and proliferation of schools of choice. So we are going to talk about that landscape today, and I'm going to start with Jeannie. So Jeannie, tell us where you think we are on the long arc of the school choice trajectory in our country.
Thanks, Michelle, and good morning, everyone. I don't think I've ever seen so much love in this movement in a really long time. I've been doing this almost 4 decades, and every day, month, and year has not gone by without enormous combat where we actually lose people on the battlefield because it's just not for the faint of heart. And in the last few years, I think largely not just because of the demand created with state laws and policies, but the supply of people who have been willing to create incredible opportunities for children, it is now so overwhelming not to embrace them and see what they're doing that it's become a political tipping point. It's no longer a hard, fast, red, blue issue. And by the way, both of those colors of parties have never been huge fans of these issues. I mean, there were years when you couldn't even get Republicans to want to see an educational freedom program, a charter school law, beyond a very modest and very weak law, get done. And so now you see people racing to help understand what it is that they can do to open up places where students and families can truly flourish.
Thanks. Okay, Kevin, a huge part of the school choice movement over the last few decades has been centered around charter schools. And when charter schools first sort of came on the scene, the whole notion was we're going to create better opportunities and outcomes for families who need those options the most. But if you listen to charter school detractor these days, they would tell you that we are far from living up to that promise. When we were talking the other day, you were telling me a little bit about the data that's just come out of New York. You can maybe tell the audience a bit about that data and just from your vantage point of funding charter leaders who are successful and allowing them to grow, like where do you see where the charter school movement has been, where we are now, and where we need to go?
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. Charter schools obviously started in the early 1990s, so it's been a little over 30 years, and there's now about 4 million students in charter schools nationally across 40-plus states. I think from the long arc, to Jeannie's long arc, I think when I think about what we're sort of all in this effort to do is to create more schools that families love and where students thrive. I think in a lot of ways, we're on this arc where we're trying to break apart the notion in our country that where you buy your house determines where you can go to school and what you can, what opportunities you have. And we're really democratizing that in terms of making that available for all. And so when I think about the charter school movement, I think we are in some ways a real beacon for that, because as a foundation, charter schools typically do not have geographic restrictions. And so that part, I think, is sort of front and center, and part of the reason why I would argue that they've been seen as such a threat by many defenders of the status quo. What you were saying in New York, so the study just came out, that about 15% of all the kids in New York go to charter schools. It's about a third of African American students in the city, and over half of the top performing 100 schools now are charter schools in the city. So I think, over time, we are seeing that really, really amazing schools and really networks of amazing schools now are showing what's possible.
Do you think in New York, parents actually differentiate between the traditional public schools and the charter schools anymore, or are we beyond that now?
I mean, I think that parents we talk to lots and lots of parents and families. Parents want a great school. They really don't care what the governance structure is. They want a great school that meets the needs of their students. I also think they want choices, right? Because not every student is the same, and families are different. And so I think that those two pieces together are really important. What I would say is, in a lot of ways, I think the scale now at 15% of all the students, charters are not going to get undone in a place even like New York, which obviously had 2 mayors ago who wanted to literally kill charter schools. I think that there's been a sort of enough power, frankly, built up to change that. But in many other places, charter schools are growing very quickly. So Texas, obviously, it's gone from 5 or 6% of the students to 7 or 8% of the students, adding hundreds of thousands of students every other year. So we see lots and lots of growth and opportunity across the nation.
So you often hear this, that once parents get a taste of something, that they're not going to be able to let it go, or they're not going to be willing to let it go. Phyllis, you have a very different point of view on this because you are in Chicago. This is not an environment that is friendly to school choice right now. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in the city, number one, and then sort of the takeaways that you have from the experience there more broadly in the country.
Yes, we are not feeling the love for choice in Chicago. It's very different than it was 20 years ago when I helped to launch New Schools for Chicago, and we had a very phenomenal CEO of our school district who agreed and supported a portfolio approach that held schools accountable and forced closure if they were not performing, and ensuring that anyone running a school had to earn the right to teach our students. And we had a mayor that was very supportive of advancing schools and replicating schools that were performing well, as well as a business community that was behind it. Today, 20 plus years later, we have our mayor, who was a former CTU, Chicago Teachers Union, organizer. We have an elected school board, which is very, very different. 21 people, actually. School board that is majority anti-charter, and triangulating between some of the policies that are being put in place to put a stranglehold, not only at the local level but now at the state level, makes it really challenging. In fact, our school board last week voted on a referendum. They approved a referendum to our governor to demand that he does not take any federal dollars that would advance anything that would relate to a voucher or a scholarship for private schools. So we are in a very, very different environment. And you were saying the lessons learned or takeaways, because I cry about the situation. We've also had a number of charter schools that have closed because partly because they are fighting for their lives. They have been unionized and can't afford to keep the clip level on the salary schedule. And again, listen, I am a deeply committed Chicago public school advocate. My parents were union educators in CPS. But we can't balance our own books. We're leaning in every month to cover the payroll, leaning into a line of credit. So it's just not sustainable for anyone. And I think the original concept and that we held dear in Chicago when we launched this work was this wasn't just about charter schools. This is about creating space for innovation, for trying new things, and for collaborating and sharing it with the rest of the district. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that we took the replication construct for charter schools and applied it to replicate high-performing Chicago public schools. One of them was Disney Magnet, which was a replicated school, won a blue ribbon at the federal level, and is one of the highest performing elementary schools in Chicago. So I think, where are the lessons learned? And I think even now, as we think about all of these various options that the federal government is providing, is creating these bridges of collaboration, because this cannot be an us versus them. And one last thing I'll say. We, in Chicago, we've got an 83% graduation rate. We've got 57% of those students, of our students coming into high school, will pursue a 4 or 2-year degree, and only 31% will attain in 10 years. And so why are we having this debate about governance structures when we should all be working together to advance our students?
So one of the things that detractors of choice say is that there hasn't been accountability. You mentioned accountability. That we've allowed low-performing charter schools to continue to operate. I think there's a lot of consternation right now about ESAs and we're going to create the Wild West of schooling. And so, Ian, I'm wondering, when you think about accountability, I really feel like in order for school choice to grow, not just in red states, but in blue states as well, we do have to address the accountability issue, right? Because we have Democratic politicians who are we need to have some accountability for taxpayer dollars. But at the same time, there are folks in the school choice movement who say too much structure, too rigid a measure of whether a school is successful or not is going to really tamp down innovation and really thinking about how do we create schools that are working for individual kids, which is at the end of the day what this is all about. So what do you think is the right balance in the whole accountability dynamic?
Yeah, so as an operator, someone who runs charter schools in New York State, I do feel like we're at the epicenter of both what is possible on the very good side and some of the greatest fears in the charter sector. On the good side, great charter schools, if you look in a particular state, that usually starts with a great authorizer. So in our case, we've got SUNY Charter Schools Institute, which is a fantastic authorizer, and I'm convinced is very linked to why New York State has some of the best charter schools in the country because of its accountability system. But on the negative side, in New York City, right now there's a legislative barrier. You can't open new charter schools. So even with all that great evidence of demand, we're restricted. You can only open schools outside of New York City, regardless of the accountability system. And so what I find interesting about accountability, I think, most critics will say that it's not that there's a lack of accountability, it's just that the accountability system is not tethered to high standards. And I'll give you what seems like a diversion, but there's just a story about Dartmouth College, and for 100+ years they had a swim test as a condition for graduation for its students. But 4 years ago, they decided to eliminate that requirement because there were disparities in who was accessing the support system for swimming, and particularly around issues of race. And so they just eliminated the test because they didn't like the disparities. In this particular case, black kids drown at almost 8 times the rate of white kids. So that actually might be a rationale for preserving standards and preserving an assessment, but they let that go. I think there's a parallel to what's happening in K-12 education. So for example, New York State just eliminated the New York State Regents requirement. Again, after 100 plus years, that was seen as the gold standard so that you knew if you got a diploma, it meant something. That meant you had basic skills in reading and math, but similarly, because of disparities, the Regents has been eliminated and replaced by something called Portrait of a Graduate. Portrait of a Graduate, very nice, lots of nice words. No one can actually define exactly what it means from an objective perspective. And this isn't just New York, it's New Jersey, it's Illinois, it's California, all reducing standards in their accountability systems. And sometimes the obstacle is the way, right? We actually have to preserve our standards to allow kids to have the dignity to demonstrate that they can meet high standards. And great round of applause. So I think the balance should be that there should be some combination of objective standards and assessments, and then some flexibility so a school can say, we're in the midst of designing a new aerospace and virtues academy. So maybe an individual school can say, these are the things that are special about our school. A certain number of graduates will be on their path to getting a pilot's license or can operate drones, whatever it may be. But this idea that we abandon standards hurts the very people that we are trying to help, and that's how I think we should think about accountability.
So if we are making some wrong decisions there in terms of abandoning standards, et cetera, my next question is, what should we be doing? And in particular, I want to sort of shift the conversation a little bit right now to traditional public schools. I was at a conference of small and medium-sized superintendents not too long ago, and it was fascinating to me because at this conference, you had a number of superintendents whose enrollments are dropping precipitously because of all of the choice dynamics. And they're in a place right now where they're like, what are we going to do, right? They're under tremendous pressure from school boards and elected officials. They have budgets that they need to balance. They have empty school buildings, et cetera. What are your thoughts on what are some of the things that traditional public school districts ought to be thinking about in order to lean into the choice dynamic instead of what I think traditionally has been the case, which is like, let me just try to close my eyes and act like it's not there or try to be against it in any way that I can. Are there ways that traditional public school districts can kind of come into the fold on this?
Let me jump back to the ARC. A lot of what we're hearing here are in states that, even a New York, that had incredible accomplishments in its early days with charter schools in terms of structure, and now with achievement over time, continuing achievement, people are leaving those states. And the states they're going to are the states that embrace education, innovation, freedom, reform, that cross-pollinate all the divides that we typically have in society. That's the ARC. Now, rather than sound like Pollyanna, it's not that everything is beautiful in those places either. But the reality is what we've seen in 30 plus years versus 185 is when you accelerate the environment for change and open up the ability for educators to create those structures and parents to choose, all of us know this in this room, great things happen. And what happens is, instead of fighting that battle in Chicago, they go to open up the school in Arizona or Florida or Indiana or Ohio or an increasing number of states that embrace them that still have to add to it. But you have 140 new entrants in Texas signing up for an ESA. What does this have to do with school districts, Michelle? In all of those places, school districts have opened up to the new innovations. In Lakeland, Florida, Wonder Here, one of the 2025 YAS Prize winners, 2 public school teachers who left the failing Lakeland district to start a school to help kids wonder, a farm school, incredible standards based on all pedagogical science. Got a call, knock on the door from the Lakeland School District. They've now voted them in to expand into Lakeland District. This is not a new endeavor. Miami, it happened. It's happening all over the country, Phoenix Unified School Districts. So what has to happen for that to happen is that you still have to pass the laws that seem competitive and antagonistic for people to come in. And until lawmakers and advocates know that, it doesn't happen. I'll just end with this one comment. We all think that we have to be kind to each other when we're having a discussion about whether it's a private school, it's a district school. Oh, I really appreciate your differences. I appreciate and respect that, but I don't really agree on those choices. Wrong. Wrong answer. If you actually want students like those in Chicago to start achieving, they have to see states behaving, embracing all of it. It's the all of the above. It's why this is called multiple choice, I think. I think that's exactly where we all should be.
I can build on that, on Jeannie's comments. I think the school districts are in an incredible position to lead right now. I mean, we're at the ASU+GSV Summit. You know, many schools just all over the country are struggling with what to do with AI, what to do about advanced computing and quantum that's going to dramatically change the landscape of how we teach and how students learn. And I'm not seeing, in Chicago anyway, a lot of the charter schools that are really at the forefront on this. A lot of folks are protecting and are concerned about privacy, as they should be. But our school districts have the power and have the resources to lead, right? To think about what are the strategies, what are the new models that we should be piloting to ensure that our students do have access to equity, economic mobility, and the dream, right? So, you know, we are in a fascinating situation where, you know, this time of bridging and collaboration that I think, you know, was discussed on the prior panel, you hear a lot of that theme during this conference, has to happen if we are going to survive. You know, I was just talking to Johnny about, you know, the future of work is going to be managing humans, agents, and robots. How are we preparing our young people for that? And so our districts need to be thinking about that and leading and bringing everyone along versus shutting down ideas and new models and opportunities.
Michelle, you created, I think, lots of these dynamics when you were superintendent in Washington, D.C. I think, so a few of my superintendent friends, one of the things I've been encouraging, and depending on which state they're in, et cetera, is the idea that if you are losing enrollment, many states now have the ability for parents to cross district lines, which, you know, for much of our history has been illegal, and people went to jail for those kind of things, which is just horrible, and I hope something that is in our rearview mirror. But I think enterprising, so, you know, the town where I live in Colorado, there are billboards on the roads entering into the city, which basically advertise for parents who are commuting into the city, why don't you bring your kid with you and enroll in one of our schools? And I actually think that's a very healthy dynamic if you think about it from a family perspective, that I think the most forward-looking superintendents, in addition to what Phyllis is talking about, are also thinking, if I have extra capacity and I'm doing a great job with my families and students, why do I continue to have these barriers based on where people buy their house of who I can serve? And so I think most enterprising superintendents that I know are really thinking, like, I'm in a dynamic marketplace and I need to, if I want to succeed, I need to serve more customers. And I don't do that by putting up walls and trying to negatively impact the sort of competition, but I am trying to do it by creating more opportunities.
And I would just quickly say, it might be counterintuitive, but something I think public school leaders should be doing I know it sounds like blasphemy, but is supporting their governors to sign on to the federal tax credit, which some people may be familiar with, but that's the new provision that will allow federal taxpayers who at least, who owe at least $1,700 to transfer that money to a scholarship granting organization. I think Jorge Lorza is in the room, but DFER has estimated that single provision could generate like $25 billion in privately funded scholarships for kids. One of the big criticisms of this initiative, though, is that there's a perception that this money will only be used for private school tuition, but more and more scholarship granting organizations like Children's Scholarship Fund are now saying, no, we're going to have that money now be available to public school kids. So that's SAT prep, after-school tutoring, special education services. So rather than see a huge amount of money now only be used in private school settings, I think public school leaders should see that this is a huge opportunity for their kids and create one less reason for kids to leave the public school system and go to a private school.
Well, and this is the really interesting thing. I like to put it this way. It's like giving away money for free. You write the check, and the next year, that check goes to help a child, or several, and the next year, you get the money back. So why oppose it? By the way, go Governor Polis. And I just want to piggyback on something you said, Kevin, and I think it really gets to the heart of what we're all trying to do. Money. When we all start helping each other understand that money was once originally allocated in communities for education to educate, done, period, end of story. There were no other rules. Here's a school, it's in your hometown, send your child, we're paying for it. Districts are a modern fixture. It doesn't mean they're bad. Yes, 74%, by the way, it's only 75% on our estimates, of students are in traditional public schools. Maybe many of them by choice. We estimate probably of those, given the open enrollment, probably 25% of those are choosing. So maybe 50% are commandeered there because of where they live. If you think about it that way, you think about, we're just talking about what is being offered to a student so funding can support that education. It's really just government. It's American Government 101. And if we start talking about it that way, instead of you have this, I have that, I have a different sector than you have, we will get a lot farther faster.
Okay, well, if we operated with common sense in the education realm, and we'd always done that, we'd be in a much different place, but we don't, and that's part of the problem. Ian, the way that you sort of described the federal tax credits and the fact that now, potentially traditional public school district students could take advantage of them through these multiple ways, it just sounds so obvious, okay, how could we be against this? But the reality is that there are tons of people out there advocating right now, particularly to Democratic governors, that they not opt in to the program. And Phyllis, you were talking in Chicago about sort of the sort of political aspects of this.
Our school board has no jurisdiction over federal allocation, but have and literally approved a referendum last week. But again, the fear, I'm sure, well, you know the fear. And I think we've got to, again, unpack the core purpose of why we're here. And what we're going to do collaboratively to advance our students is a lot of money at risk. And our governor is balancing the pressures, because can you imagine what it would mean for our students to get access to after-school programming, right, who can't afford it, or to SAT or ACT prep and opportunities that they deserve and can't get access to right now?
Right, so
it would be a game changer.
If kids, the way that I understand this, if governors are not opting in, then those tax dollars will be going to the federal treasury.
Go to other states.
Instead of staying in their communities.
To other states.
Or other states. And so my question is this, given that is the case, are we ever going to get beyond the partisan politics in education? Like, could we get to a point in the next 5 or 10 years where everyday parents are finally like, okay, this doesn't make any sense, right? Because my sense of this is that the average parent has no idea what is going on with this tax credit debate. They don't know that their governors or their state legislators are even considering this. If you tried to explain it to them, they would like gloss over. They would have no clue.
Average informed, well-informed business person doesn't know what's going on with it. I've had people hear me or other people say something. They're like, "What are you talking about? Taxes?" They actually pay for accountants.
Right. So they have no clue. So my question is, like, that is an environment, in my opinion, that is ripe for the special interests to just drive whether this decision gets made or not. So, like, do we have any hope of trying to change that dynamic, or is this just too hard and too in the weeds and too far away from, like, can I buy my groceries tomorrow?
Well, you know, I run schools, so I'm a generally optimistic person. But when I started running schools in 2010, there actually was a lot of bipartisan support around charter schools in particular. It was almost as if there was an agreement that we would park our differences at the door. You know, if we disagreed on social welfare policy or the environment, you know, we can fight like hell on all these other issues. But when it came to this issue, we can all agree that a kid, particularly a low-income kid in the Bronx, if his school has perennially only graduated, you know, 18% of their kids able to read, that kid should have a shot. I think we can get back. I think we can get back there, actually. And the federal tax credit may be the vehicle to do so. So, as I think you mentioned, Kevin, there actually has been a Democratic governor, Jared Polis in Colorado, who has signed on. Folks like Jorge Elorza, Arnie Duncan, Rahm Emanuel, so prominent Democrats are coming out and saying, you know what, guys, this is kind of crazy that we're against this. So my hope is that that actually does become a vehicle that more and more Republicans and Democrats come to support something which I actually think is really brilliant and creative, because a state loses $0, right? So this is all federal tax money, and as Jeannie said, it's repurposed. An individual has to pay $1,700 anyway, so what if you just now transfer that money? So I'm optimistic. My hope is that a new alliance forms, but here's the deal. At the end of the day, those governors, those leaders who continue to graduate kids with an inability to read, at the end of the day, those parents, like they're starting to do, will start moving with their feet, too. So a lot of this is on the onus of parents themselves, too, to recognize that your kid deserves a great opportunity to go to a great school, and if it's not being provided to you in your state, leave.
Can I just make a comment also about bipartisanship? Ian's experience, Kevin, I think you'd say the same thing nationally, but in Colorado, DC, clearly Michelle, Chicago, all of the stuff that was done was rank and file, very united. It's really when you get to the top levels. They used to say that when a president mentions school choice, we're screwed, because whoever's on the other side immediately runs the other way. And I think we have to remind ourselves that most of us are not walking around or at our kitchen tables in our offices in our cars going, I really don't like that school because it's run by a Republican. Right? I really don't like that program because a Democrat started it. And so if we can just get above that and realize that we actually do have a rank and file support, and we should be saying to people, not like, oh, when is it going to be more bipartisan? We should be like, where are you? You're on the wrong side.
Yeah. All right. I do not have time to get into another topic, which I'm fascinated about, which is micro schools. But a quick, because we only have a few seconds left. Okay, so this is the lightning round. One thing that you are most excited about or most worried about in the school choice movement as you look at the next 5 years? One thing that you either want to happen or not happen. Real quick.
I'll go. I think the diversity of school operators and entrepreneurs in terms of diversity of model, diversity of leadership, diversity of where these amazing schools are starting, that gives me immense, immense hope.
Ian?
I'm really excited about the growth of classical schools. I just was at their conference, bigger than this one, which was quite amazing. And parents seem to be very interested in schools that are focused on the good, the true, and the beautiful.
I'm excited about microschools, and I'm worried about microschools and that they're going to be treated like the orphan child of the education movement.
Close us out, Phyllis.
I'm hopeful for parents who are going to fight tooth and nail to make sure their kids get into whatever school, whatever type it is, that is the best that their child deserves.
Great. Join me in thanking our panel.
All right. We are still working our way through our Monday breakfast session. Stay tuned. We still have an amazing conversation with presidential candidate, former U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. But before we get Rahm on stage, we're going to have a great conversation. And I think if we could just flip this to the next piece, that would be great. Here we go. So less than a year ago, Google announced its AI for Education Accelerator, an initiative to bring critical AI and job-ready skills to students and faculty across the country. And like AI, the accelerator has achieved more scale than we've ever seen. Here to tell us why more than 400 higher education institutions across all 50 states are working with millions of students to deliver this no-cost program, please welcome Lisa Gavelber, founder, Grow with Google.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be back at the summit. I'm so happy to see everyone. And I know it's been a long morning already, so I thought I'd start with a little question. How many of you used AI in your work last week? I think that's almost everyone. And how many of you got any sort of formal training in how to use that AI? That's almost no one. And that gap between this tool in our hands and the real knowledge and how to use it well, that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about today. We all know AI is here. Almost all of you guys raised your hands. We all know that students are using it in all kinds of ways, including in the best ways, as a personal tutor. We know that teachers are using it to bring to life interesting new lesson plans. And we know that institutions are using it to help in all kinds of ways as they work from the front in teaching to the back in making their operations more efficient. But we also know that to make the most of this AI opportunity, every single person needs to know how to use it both effectively and responsibly. Having a piano in your house doesn't make you a musician, and having an AI tool at your disposal also doesn't make you fluent. If we want students to be able to be prepared for the jobs of today, if we want faculty to be able to learn to use these tools to help teach their students in new and interesting ways, and if we want to make the most of this at our higher ed and lower academic institutions, we need to invest not just in platforms, but much more importantly, we need to invest in people. And that's what we're doing at Google. As a matter of fact, we've just made 2 of the largest announcements, actually the biggest commitment ever, to train all 6 million educators in our country absolutely for free. And we're doing this in partnership with ISTE and ASCD. And we're so excited about this program, partly because it was built by educators, for educators, built in bite-sized, easily digestible, you can do it on your break ways, and really hands-on interactive learning for every educator from K-12 all the way to higher education. But we also know that beyond teaching each individual how to use this tool, our institutions need tools, they need help. And that's why we created the Google AI for Education Accelerator. This accelerator, in combination with the Google AI Educator Series I was just talking about, is available for free to every every nonprofit higher ed institution in America. And already over 400 colleges and universities in our country are using it. Everyone from the University of Michigan, my alma mater, to Purdue, the University of Texas System, the University of Virginia, Vanderbilt, USC, NYU, so many others. And in the accelerator, I want to tell you what's included. All of our Grow with Google career certificates, so career training for all your students, all of our AI training programs, and our most advanced AI tools, Gemini and NotebookLM, including all of those privacy protections that we care about, FERPA, HIPAA, and COPPA compliance. Those are all amazing things, but the most important thing, I think, about the Google AI for Education Accelerator is the community that we're building. This is a time in history where every single person, whether you're just starting out or you've been doing this forever, is at the same point in their learning curve. And so what's important about the accelerator is the ability for everyone to learn from each other. Included in the program is our Google AI Professional Certificate. And what I love about that certificate is not only was it built by the experts at Google, it was vetted by some of the top employers in the country. And I know we all care that our students today are landing well in the world of work. This certificate actually teaches you exactly what these employers are looking for. As a matter of fact, it's being used today by top employers to upskill their current employees. People like Walmart, Deloitte, Verizon, Colgate, and so many others are using it for their own employees. And we're excited to announce that the American Council on Education is recommending college credit for this course. So you can take the AI Professional Certificate, you can earn a credential that helps you stand out in the workforce and gives you the skills that employers are looking for, and earn college credit at the same time. We're super excited about this program. We're excited about the Google AI Educator Series. And in reality, what we're excited about is bringing people together to learn from each other. One of my favorite examples is a program that we do in our webinar series as part of the accelerator. A few weeks ago, Clay Shirky from NYU used his webinar to teach every other participant in the seminar how they're using NotebookLM at NYU for faculty and for research and for teaching. Then the University of Maryland created an innovative program. And guess what? Texas A&M heard about it and created their own AI Learnathon. And that's what we're seeing over and over again. Because not only do you want to see what the experts in AI are saying, I think you want to see what everyone else is doing, and that's what the Google AI Accelerator is providing. So we're working on building an extraordinary community. I want to invite all of you to participate. I brought with me a few URLs so that you can easily find access to all these materials. Again, we're providing the Google AI Educator Series and the AI Accelerator absolutely for free, and I hope you'll join us. Thank you so much.
You're good. Okay.
Okay. Good morning. Okay, I'm a teacher. I need better than that. Good morning. It is my pleasure to introduce a young gentleman to you today. Well, he's not that young anymore, but he looks good, okay? You probably know him as being an aide in the White House to Bill Clinton. I'm sure you know him as being the chief of staff for Barack Obama. He was also the mayor of Chicago, and currently he is ambassador. But that's what he does. That is not who he is to me. So I would like to introduce you to who he is. He's the gentleman, when I sat on the Board of Education, who listened to me. I was the first teacher to sit on the board. So when there were critical decisions to be made, he listened to me. He is also the gentleman that I remember going to the homes of families who had lost their children to violence, not only to console them, but actually paying for the funerals. I remember him going to midnight basketball games. If you don't know what those are, in Chicago, the boys could not play basketball in the daytime or early afternoon for fear of violence. And so they played at midnight. I remember him taking some of the young men home to their houses, sort of scaring the parents to death when they saw these police cars drive up. I remember him being a friend, not just a friend, but a great son, a very good husband. Amy says he's working toward being a great husband, and a wonderful father. It is truly my honor to introduce someone who I call my friend, Mr. Rahm Emanuel.
I think you're, oh, you want me in the middle? Hello, Rahm. It's great to see you. You've talked so much about your family, and Terry and I had the pleasure of being at your dad's funeral, and so many great things were said about him and your family and your incredibly accomplished brothers. Can you just share a bit about your family and talk about what was the secret as we think about educating our young people to aspire at the levels that you all have achieved?
Well, well, first of all, let me say that there's not a secret. That's number one. Number two, if you don't want to read it, don't read it. But since this is the most frequent question I get, I wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal on parenting, which I happen to think is the most important thing we do, and we don't, as a country, discuss family life. That said, just a couple basics. One, my dad was a pediatrician, and he always said he never met a child that was spoiled because they were told too often that they were loved. Not that he applied that to his own kids, but that's what he applied to. We were called schmucks, but other kids were. And it's true. And every one of my children, they're now 29, 28, and 26, every day they hear from me, I love you and I'm proud of you. Doesn't mean I'm not angry at you, but you get that. Two, my mother did this, and I think it's very important, and we copied it, Amy and I. We had a round table as our kitchen table, so there was no head at the table. And you were expected to come and debate, argue, scream, yell. Jokingly, when Amy and I saw Ari and I together, she goes, "Why are you guys fighting all the time?" I said, "We're not fighting." She goes, "Yes, you are." I go, "No, that's how we talk to each other." the more important, the two other things I would say to be quick here, I don't believe in quality time. I think it's crap. Be present in your child's life. That's a more important value. Lastly, we grew up, in our family room was my grandmother's purse, and above it was her passport and my two great aunts' passport. That purse carried their papers to America at the turn of the century. And on either side of that framed purse and passports were the black and white photos of relatives that never made it to America. And it was, one side was dad's, one side was mom's, and it was my parents' direction that being an American was a gift, and you are not to waste this gift. People who never came here, never got here, died, and your job is to relish what America is. And I happen to think it's the lottery of life is being an American, and you have to relish that. So those are really quickly, and the last thing I'll close on, even when I was congressman, mayor, chief of staff, we had 4 meals, dinner a night as a family. And I told the office, you schedule around those, you cannot schedule my family time around the work. So Shabbat dinner, Sunday dinner, 2 during the week, and that was mandatory. And then you could figure out anything else. Being present in your kid's life.
Well, you just gave me chills with that answer, so thank you for that. And I'm going to come in hot. Why do you want to be president of the United States?
Well,
Oh, geez.
obviously, what I answered the first question really moved you, Michael. Yeah. Well, you have a unique way of boxing your emotions. So what I would say, look, I haven't decided, but what is, and I'm going around the country, but what motivates me is I'm the product of the American dream. My grandfather came to Chicago in 1914 without a bucket to spit in or a window to throw it out of. And a generation next, his grandson is both the mayor of the city that welcomed him, and it was chief of staff to the president, senior advisor to another one, and represented us overseas. But if we're honest, the American dream is disappearing for more Americans. They don't believe in it. And I think this is a make or break period. Now, we have gone 20 years with 2 presidents, different presidents, but both are trying to restore a past that's not coming back. We should actually be, what I think is important in 2028 is we have a chance to actually discuss, argue, debate, and start building a future that includes more people, and more importantly than that, is restoring confidence and faith that owning a home, sending your kids to college, saving for your retirement, and not going to the poorhouse because you get sick isn't actually a struggle, but see something you can achieve. And the fact is, people have lost faith that that's ever going to be accessible. And if I think that I have something that not only have that vision, but more importantly, have the strength, because I think tough times require a tough leader, then I'll do it. If I don't, I'll go work on fly fishing.
Sounds good.
Which one, the fly fishing part? I got it, don't worry about it.
Rahm, you've done so much and seen so much. I want to talk a little bit about the Obama years. And look, Good, Better, and Different, Race to the Top was one of the most significant transformative initiatives at that the federal government employed in education, but did not fully deliver, right? The full aspirations of what it set out to achieve. What do you think, and how did we miss it? What do you think are the implications as we think about charting forth a path in the future?
Well, one is, I think you have to run the clock backwards from the nation at risk under Ronald Reagan, and then through President Bush 41, President Clinton's public school choice, plus Teachers of Excellence, Leave No Child Behind, and then a race to the top. All of them, not a linear line, but through fits and starts, good and bad, we saw progress on our academic achievements. Some sliding, and just be upfront. Around 2012, whatever, people walk away from standards and accountability because, not wrongly, we were teaching to a test rather than tests measuring the progress. But the answer wasn't to abandon standards and accountability. and then we accelerate what was a trend. I happen to think as an instrument, and I've said this on my plans on both community college and also on replicating Mississippi's reading excellence around phonics, et cetera, it would be modeled on a race to the top to incentivize the adoption of the right type of excellence in education, but also for the high school years. But I don't think it did not fail. It did not get tweaked at the right time that it should have been tweaked. And this is not, here's a playbook, run the play, and that's it. You got to be adopting, changing, altering, but with the single goal to see improvement over a period of time. I happen to think, and this is not to be partisan, but Republicans have walked away from public schools and the funding of public schools, and Democrats have walked away from standards and accountability, and our kids are falling through the cracks. Now, I want to be clear about this. Every challenge we have on reading, math, high school graduation, post-secondary education, all the answers are actually operating today in America. Unlike, let's say, curing cancer, Mississippi showed us something on reading. Alabama's showing stuff on math. I haven't gone around the country. La Crosse, Wisconsin, and in South Carolina, the community college program with our high schools is showing us a post-college career program, post-high school college career program. So the answer is right in front of us. Not losing the nerve is what's missing, not the answer. The answer, we know what to do. The nerve and the strength to see it through is what's missing.
So leadership's about vision and setting priorities and then motivating people to get after those priorities. And I've heard you talk multiple times about how important education is and your education vision. And one thing in particular that people don't talk about enough, I don't think, in terms of leadership, is early childhood education. Talk about what your vision is here. I mean, you talked importance of these different things need to happen, but what's your vision? How do you motivate America to have the kind of education system not only it deserves, but really is crucially needed?
It's a great, well, one is, as somebody has studied this, both read about it and I think activated, and I used to say this at our dinner table, leadership is knowing what you want to do and why you want to do it, and then the strength and the courage to get it done. If you go through FDR, Reagan, Lincoln, etc., leadership is not having all the ideas and not just strength. It's the combination of both knowing where you want to go and then the strength to get it done. Now, that said, one is when I go to college, you don't know this, but I had a scholarship to the Joffrey Ballet School. And I did not take it, much still to this day, my Jewish mother's anger at me. So my dad was a pediatrician. I wanted to become an early childhood educator and then started studying to be a child psychologist. At Chicago, when I got there, I was shocked. We didn't have universal kindergarten, let alone we had the shortest school day and the shortest school year in the United States of America. We did not have full-day kindergarten for every child. So over the 8 years, in the first contract, we added full-day kindergarten for every child universal. And by the second contract in my second term, and having battled the state for additional funding and finally getting it done, something that every mayor tried to get done, we got done, we created universal full-day pre-K for every 4-year-old, and then raised the standards for the Head Start and other programs so they were focused on educational preparation rather than something else. So, but it's part of, it's something I firmly believe in, not only professionally, I firmly believe in as the son of a pediatrician. I know a lot of you thought I was going to say something else, but as a son of a pediatrician, that early childhood education is essential.
Let's jump into that, because when you were mayor of the city of Chicago, a great mayor of the city of Chicago, I should add, you made education a centerpiece of your administration.
That's why I ran.
From early childhood to what you did with city colleges and making that accessible to everyone, to extending our school day. Can you talk about what were some of the things that you feel like, again, you nailed, and if you could go back and change anything, what would that be?
Well, one is I also want to say this is a team. Dr. Janice Jackson, as you heard from Dr. Hines, she was on the school board all years, so we did it as a team. Obviously, as the mayor in Chicago, you lead that team. I do think we added 4.5 years to a child's education in Chicago, pre-K, kindergarten, and then an hour and 15 minutes every day, 2 weeks every year. The largest increase in time anywhere. If you want to break the cycle of poverty, you believe in equity, you're not going to do it on the shortest school day and the shortest school year in the United States. Not possible. It's a lie. And if you believe in equity, allowing 50% of our kids not to read at grade level is inconsistent. Either you get upset about it or you're lip syncing the idea of equity. You cannot have equity as a core principle and be complacent with what's going on in this country. Number two, I actually think in a bizarre way, I don't think it was a plan, but it ended up being a plan, which is the high school years were the biggest reform. And when I say it wasn't a plan is, Janice and I were talking about this earlier, it comes together, but it wasn't like, there's puzzle pieces. One, we're the first city, if you got a B average in high school, we made community college tuition, books, and transportation free. First city to do it. Thank you for the rule. Two, which is I'm seeing around the country replicated, we set a goal, 50%, we got to 49 and some change. Kids would graduate with college credit. Dual credit, dual enrollment, international baccalaureate, AP. And it saved mom and dad money, and it gave kids wind in their back. They were confident that they could handle the next chapter of their life. And they're never going to be sorry that they got college credit and didn't go to college or whatever. Third, the biggest piece, the point of the spear, which if I decide to dive into the deep end without my water wings, the biggest thing was called Learn, Plan, Succeed. To receive your high school diploma, you had to show a letter of acceptance from a college, a community college, a branch of the armed forces, or a vocational school. We got to 98% compliance with that program. And remember, 83% of the kids in Chicago come from poverty or below. Don't ever tell me that child, that background, can't do it. You give them support, set goals, challenge them, they'll get there. Don't throw the towel in on a child. And if you do get caught trying, you'll never regret it. And to me, those high school years were the biggest changes. And we got to, from 56% of our kids graduating, we got to 83%. 67% of our kids were going to college or community college. We have the largest junior ROTC program in the United States of America, is in the Chicago Public Schools. This is during my tenure. I don't know what the data is today. And our reading and math scores grew to the point that Sean Reardon at Stanford called Chicago the best of the top 100. Now, I think the high school is the biggest. Now, my regret, I made a mistake. It's on me. I've said this before. I dealt with the last year contract. We were in a fiscal mess. People forget this, but when I become mayor, the mayor before me did not even do the budget at the schools, which is mandated, because it was just a mess. And I revoked the final year pay for teachers because we were in a fiscal crisis, and I should have gone to the teachers and the leadership. I set off a dynamic that became hand-to-hand combat, and that's on me. I made a mistake. And the only thing you can do in life is learn from mistakes, apply messages and lessons forward. And so I wouldn't have done what I did. I would never give up on my goals. Amy always jokes, we have 3 great kids, but she said if we ever had a 4th, she was going to call it patience. As a daily reminder of a value, I tell her patience is a waste of time. So that's where we're at. So.
You go ahead.
Talk about so President Obama, you both Chicagoans, you were his chief of staff. What'd you learn from President Obama? What made him a great leader in your experience?
Well, I mean, one, his first selection, the chief of staff, is an unbelievable great. No, I mean, first of all, I learned from, my whole life I learned everything. And I got a chance to work with President Clinton, President Obama. One, look, I mean, so I'll give you this classic decision. We get the auto thing worked out, we get the TARP figured out, we pass the Recovery Act, the Children's Health Insurance Program reauthorized. So we have this famous meeting in the Roosevelt Room right off the Oval Office, which is he referred to it, financial reform, health care, and cap and trade, his 3 children. And we had to decide which one goes first, and you can't do all 3 simultaneously, although he wanted to. So I have this big meeting. It's a Saturday. It's in the spring. And I point over there because at the Roosevelt table on the other side is the domestic team, and they say to the president, every day that we don't do health care is a day we can't do health care, and it's a day you're not going to get it done. True. From a legislative, you look at the history of health care. The economic and financial team is, look, there's all this uncertainty, we're almost in a depression, we're trying to get out of it, just don't rock the boat, and all these obviously are rock the boat. The political team, of which I was a principal voice to, I was arguing for financial reform first because I thought the political system, you can see after the TARP and after the Recovery Act, the Tea Party is building. And that we had, if you do financial reform, all the bankers will be on the other side, all the financial sector will be on the side, and the American people who've lost their homes want to see you giving these guys their comeuppance. If you try to do healthcare reform, the interests, pharmaceutical, hospitals, doctors, all have to be either neutralized or on your side of the table. And I said, it's horrible politics for where the country is right now. He gets 307 electoral votes, so he gets to pick. He went with health care. Not wrong. You have a pre-existing condition or a family member does, you have health care today, which did not exist a decade ago. On the other hand, we also had the Tea Party. And one of the things you got to know about leadership is everybody wants, okay, here's what they did. Everything has trade-offs. I used to joke in the mayor's office and in the Oval Office, the only choices that make it in are bad and worse. And you have to have the judgment, the character, and the quality of people to help you navigate in a fog which one's bad and which one's worse. One piece of history out of this, besides the healthcare. Bay of Pigs, Cuban Missile Crisis. Failure, success. What if they were reversed? Knowing which is bad and which is worse and how to navigate is their judgment, their inquisitiveness, and their ability to have people around that walk in and say, you're out of your mind. And both President Clinton and President Obama, and trust me, I used to be 6'2" and 250 pounds. I walked in multiple times a day, and multiple times they told me to get the hell out of there. And the leadership that President Obama showed was he was never scared to have smart people, capable people, people that knew their book of business better than him around him. I'm hoping you get the subtle translation to what's happening today. If you haven't, let me talk to you in the back, okay? But that, to me, is the biggest thing. And I mean, there's many times, and I'm pointing to Dr. Janice Jackson, Dr. Hines, they would come in and smack me around. And you want them to do that. Now, once I made a decision, the debate was over. That was also true with President. Once he made the decision, I gave him the best advice I could. Here's what we're going to go do. Yes, sir.
Yep. And one would argue, Rahm, that you've got a lot of those same qualities. In fact, you've been writing a lot about that.
Which ones?
We won't talk about the bad ones. We'll get to those later. But you've been writing a lot. Recent op-ed,
Right.
Saying how the Democrats need to create a more effective forward-looking agenda as we're entering into the midterms, and for 28. And I guess the question is, if you were defining a clear and forward-looking agenda for education, what would that encompass?
Well, you're going to get into a bug of mine, so I suppose this is right. I don't consider myself an education reformer. I think it's a bad term. I believe in excellence, and I'm not for mediocrity. And I think to all of those who obviously you care about this issue, I care about this issue, I think it's weird, I really do. I grew up under Bill Clinton, I just saw Governor Riley, you had Governor Hunt, you had Governor Winters in Mississippi, Lawton Childs in Florida, Zell Miller in Georgia. I can't name 5 governors, both parties, that have been at the forefront of improving education. But think about this, and I say this from my mayoral days. You know how I knew a neighborhood that we were working on improved? When the real estate term sheet of a home had the school on the bottom. That's when I knew we had succeeded. People will go through great challenges, move distances, move to a new neighborhood in the city to get excellence. And we should be making the argument around the value of excellence versus this type of school versus that type of funding mechanism. It's a means. Everybody at the kitchen table, when they're making a decision either to stay or to move to another place, is around a school that they think produces great education for their children. And people will go travel across the Pacific to send their kids to a university. So to me, that is the core. I find it, and I said this before, and I want to repeat it, that we have accepted as a country that built on the value of failure is not an option. You're at a 50-year reading low, or 30-year reading low, where 50% of our kids cannot read at grade level. And you know more about the president's position on windmills than the reading scores. The White House has never commented on it. No 2 governors of both parties came together and said, we have an emergency meeting, what are we going to do? And again, this is my view, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and Tennessee that are all seeing massive results. We're going to make phonics as governors, the science of reading, the national standards, no ifs, ands, or buts. Here's how we're going to do it. That's leadership. And I will be honest. When I was in Japan, I learned a lot about Japan, learned a lot about the Indo-Pacific. The country I learned the most about was America. 8,000 miles away, I'm like looking at this country, I'm going, what is going on? And we have become complacent about failure, as if it's okay. Things we would never accept in our own kids. And you have young men walking around with an emptiness in their eyes, a sense of loss and alienation you would never accept in your son or daughter. And as long as it's not our kids, we kind of shrug at the shoulders. Well, these are our kids, and I don't get it. I don't understand it. And if let's say X amount of people run and I decide, more likelihood than not that I'm not the nominee. I don't care. I'm going to say what I think is important, and you can't get from here to there, compete against a country, China, that's 3 times our size, and accept 50% of your kids not reading at 3rd grade level reading. What makes you think 4th grade's going to be easier? Unless basically we've thrown all standards out the window. I think it's nuts. And I have a couple other adjectives I like to use, but I can't do it.
Exactly. One of the reasons I was very excited to have Rahm here is I've heard him speak multiple times, just in general speeches about education right at the forefront. And what he just described, I couldn't agree more with. And this whole concept of excellence as opposed to reform is dead on. Because we're at an Education Innovation Summit, let me ask you about Iran.
About what?
Iran. Okay.
Let me say this. Their greatest export is the brain drain.
Yeah.
Because they have highly educated people and they're leaving the country.
So just
What?
what's your quick reaction to what's going on, and if you were president, what would you be doing?
Well, if I was president, this gets 2 things. I can't unring this bell.
So what's wrong?
Okay, you can't unring a bell that should never have been rung. Second, this option, military option, has been shopped to 4 different presidents. All of them looked at it and said no, except for one guy. Now, what I would have said is, if you look beforehand, you had massive civil disobedience and civil unrest, meaning the country did not accept the political system. That's how you get change. We destroyed that. 2, after June, Iran was on their back heels, a weakened country. 3, they came to you with a massive piece of reform that you did not realize, because you sent 2 real estate agents to negotiate nuclear weapons, you did not realize was a massive give. So I can't unring a bell that should never have been rung. Now, I laid this out a month ago, which is in the middle. 3 things, because Iran, we went into the war to destroy their capacity to get a nuclear weapon. They discover in the middle of the war they have a nuclear option. It's called the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that's the problem. So we've gone from uranium to the Strait of Hormuz. 3 things, short term, all ships get out or no ships get out. That's the short term. So we've never had a war where the United States told the enemy, you get to make more money, which is what Iran was doing, selling to China. And we permitted it. Number 2, medium term. Rather than Iran charging a fee, the United Nations Maritime Association, the United States would have to support the UN. That would be a breath of fresh air. They'll run the commission, and it gets split between Iran, Bahrain, Kuwait, all the countries that were hit. Iran doesn't run the commission for Iran. It's not the Strait of Hormuz, it's not their backwater. So medium term, United Nations. Long term, understand and appreciate that Iran's whole goal in life was to get the United States out of the Gulf. So double down to prove that they're never going to achieve the goal. Use the Abraham Accords, which is a peace deal between Israel, Bahrain, UAE, other members of the Gulf, that if you're in the Abraham Accords, 3 things. No tariffs, first in line for all U.S. weapons, and 3rd, it will be the financing vehicle for pipelines out of the Strait of Hormuz to bypass it to the Gulf of Oman. Short term, everybody in or nobody in. Medium term, United Nations sets up a commission. Long term, start financing a pipeline out of the Strait of Hormuz. But again, I'm trying to make lemonade out of a crappy lemon, and I mean this. This is not about gut. This is about having your military, your Secretary of State, everybody who has strong views, debate, discuss, analyze a decision to put men and women at risk their lives for a mission for the United States. The idea that you were not prepared for the Strait of Hormuz means your Google for what would happen if our Iran war happened didn't work. This is not a national security secret. Every plan that has gone back 5 to 30 years knows that the option is the Strait of Hormuz. And you took your 2 minesweepers in the Gulf and moved them in the Indo-Pacific. You're not ready for prime time. And now the United States is exposed as, I wouldn't say a paper tiger, it's not a paper tiger, but exposed in a fundamentally weakened way. It's insane what it's done here. And then lastly, since I'm going to use this to make this point, I was the first to say this. If you're in the federal government, land management over in Montana to the Oval Office and everything between, no participating in the prediction markets betting against America. You have young men and women from Peoria, Pontiac, risking their lives, and you got some little Nepo baby from Palm Beach sitting with their number 10 suntan lotion betting against America? What is this? And I'm sorry, I know the president says, I prefer that you don't do that. No. Sign the executive order. He has all the authority. Ban it. You're a federal employee. You're not allowed to participate in the prediction markets at all. Congress, cabinet, judge, stop it. Either the country is on the line, not just the kid from Peoria, not just the kid from Pontiac. This is insane.
Well, that sounds very presidential to me.
No, no. You know what it is?
So-
No, I'm going to tell you what
Yeah.
it is. It's a father with 2 kids who are Navy reservists.
No, that's right.
The idea, look, I raised my kids with the same sense. You're somewhere in your life, you're going to do national service. Now, I got to be honest. I thought they would go to Teach for America. I never thought Zach became a Navy intel officer. Just went to reserve status after 7 years. That was his choice. Amy and I supported it. No, I think that one of the things that's missing is, and what I think, the true 1% in this country is not the punks that acquire 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 homes. It's people who have selflessly given something of themselves to something bigger.
Yep.
And it's not presidential. It's meaning that either we as a country are going to start acting like a unified country rather than have these Hunger Games where if you're the other side, you pay to beat the crap out of them, et cetera. But I do also think you got a bunch of rich kids trading on inside information, and other kids are risking everything of their lives. There's a young couple in America with twins who are 7 months old who will only know their father as a photo.
Yep.
And that's just not acceptable that other people get to make money off of that.
No, that's real. I mean, I was kind of making light because there's some of us in
don't
here
worry about
that
us.
do want you to run for president. And if you do, I just want to end on a lighter note. You know, you've heard of Stephen Colbert. He has the questionnaire that he asks questions of his guests designed to reveal your true personality and help you be known. So quick lightning round. What's your best sandwich?
What's my best sandwich? Manny's. It's called the mayor's sandwich. It's on an onion roll, corned beef, and pastrami. That was when I didn't give a crap.
What's the one thing you own that you really should throw out?
What's the one?
What's the one thing you own that you really should throw out?
What's the one thing I own that I really should throw out? Well, it's a bike that doesn't really. It's lived past its time.
Lived past its time?
Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Oh, Godfather 2.
Most used app on your phone?
Most used
App on your iPhone?
the Apple News.
You get one song to listen for the rest of your life. What is it?
Horses. Yeah, horses.
All right. Well,
It's actually, you know what? Let me revise that.
All right.
It would be Hallelujah. It's the most repeated song ever, and sung. And there's a great documentary that would say Hallelujah.
Oh, I love that.
Okay.
Well, hallelujah.
Yeah. White Horse is a good song too, though.
Horse is the second too? All right. Well, we give you, ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Rahm Emanuel.
Thank you.
Off the charts. Thank you.
On that note, thank you so much for those of you that stayed for breakfast. We just heard from Rahm Emanuel. Who doesn't love a great corned beef and pastrami sandwich? So for those of you that are hungry, we'll see you back here for lunch. And enjoy the morning.